Tea helped. I know it helped me a lot. Hello and welcome to Sound Like, where today we're going to be looking at Invincible. As always, we are going to be looking at the song from start to finish, analysing each section to look at how you can sound just like it. Now, Invincible is a bit of an interesting song. It doesn't have the usual verse-chorus approach. It actually kind of builds over time, so this one's going to be a lot more detailed than usual. So with keeping that in mind, this video is going to be very much about analysing what you are doing in terms of your playing and the effects that you have at your disposal to accompany that whole idea of this song building up over time and how your effects can lend themselves towards that. But before we dive in, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to stay up to date with every video that I put out. Get yourself a strong cup of tea and let's dive into Pedalcam. So let's look at effects for Invincible to kick off with. Now, I'm going to make this a bit easier just by kind of showing what effects I'm using kind of on all of the patches I'm using. So I'm going to go to memory manual mode and I'm using all kind of the lower 6 buttons on the bottom here. So the intro part is just the blues driver and the delay pedal, just to kind of give a bit of a sound like this. Now that's used quite a lot throughout the song, just for that nice bit of dirt between, from the blues driver and a bit of delay from there. So I'm moving on to the next patch, which is my Kaoss patch. Now this is just using some delay with no distortions or anything at all, because I am using the Kaoss Pad, which you can't quite see here. I'm actually, for this song, I'm testing out incorporating it into my board. Usually it's on a separate channel. But I would like to use the delay to affect the setting I've got for this, so it'll sound sort of like this. That sound is kind of being boosted by the delay that's going on there. There are no distortions at all going on at all for that, because it would just absolutely destroy the sound and you want that to be as clean as possible. I usually keep my Kaoss Pad separate from my pedals for that very reason, to keep all the effects away from it so I can isolate it and make sure that it's sounding as good as it can be. Next is the build, which uses the delay again with the blues drive and also my overdrive distortion. What these are doing here, they're not going in together, they're on a parallel circuit, so they do sound a little bit different than they would do together. And together it sounds like this. It just gives it a lot more definition when we come into that build section to really kind of pull focus. Just the blues driver on its own would not have the bite I want out of that, so that's why they're kind of on a parallel circuit. Number 4 is the verse. Now this is just the blues drive and sounds a little, that should sound like this. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, just a nice bit of crunch there, nothing too dramatic. Next is the solo, which is using the whammy, which has MIDI sending to it to turn the pedal on to an octave up. The overdrive distortion, and then a parallel circuit is the big muff, and this will sound like. Pretty good, pretty big, having a nice range of sounds and frequencies there from the 2 very different pedals. Sounds really good. And lastly is the outro, which is just the delay again and with my overdrive distortion to have as big a sound as possible but not going too crazy, and it will just sound like this. Sounds pretty good to me if you ask me. Now let's get into the song and see how I'm using these effects. Okay, so we've now had a broad look at the pedals that I'm using and the sounds that we should be trying to get, so let's get into the song with the intro. So the guitar for the intro utilizes a slide. Now this is kind of best achieved if you have a sustainer circuit, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. There is another way around it. If you have an EBow, that works just as well. It's the same principle. If you have neither of those, then you will have to rely on kind of picking the string to kind of get that sound. But if you've got a sustainer circuit and a slide, this is going to work great. So let's give it a go. Now, my sustainer doesn't work tremendously well on the high E, which is where, in my opinion, this does sound best. Just the timbre and the kind of the thinness of the string sounds great, but so I'm going to have to use the B string for this, but it will sound broadly like this. It sounds brilliant. If you've got the sustainer circuit, you don't have to worry about picking where that kind of might interrupt a kind of sound that you're going for. Like it sounds like this. It just doesn't work quite as well without the sustainer. I have to have that string just constantly vibrate so that you can just kind of tune in the note that you want to kind of at any given time. Like I've said, it's not the end of the world if you don't have a sustainer circuit, but it's a good song to kind of have in your mind of what would you do if you had one, or just a kind of like a good excuse to get one. In terms of the sound for the intro part, it is just the delay and the blues driver. The main idea and the kind of key thing to keep in mind with this is not to have too much gain on the whatever drive you're using for this. Just because it's the beginning of the song, it's kind of ramping up, and the whole idea of Invincible is that it gets louder and builds up as the song goes on. There is no point to this song if you're going to start with quite a big crunchy sound. You want it to be quite small. And that is just a bit of advice for you there if you're thinking about what kind of pedals and settings do you want to use for this. Start small for Invincible and then get gradually bigger. It's really good if you've got multiple distortion pedals to play with, or if you've got, like I have, as well as a few distortions, a volume pedal so that you can kind of bring in the gain from the guitar just to kind of, as you move forward with this. It's just a bit of advice there. Now, that's the intro done, then let's move on to the Kaoss Pad section. Okay, now let's have a look at what's going on for the Kaoss Pad section. Okay, so if you've not got a Kaoss Pad, you don't have to pay attention to this part. It's not really hugely important. It's going to be quite short anyway. But let's just have a look at the sound that we're kind of going for. So within the Kaoss Pad 2, which is what I've got and what I'm using, it is preset 81 that I'm using. As I said earlier in Pedalcam, the Kaoss Pad is going through my pedal board for once. This is so that for this section, I can add in my delay, and for later on after the solo, when we're using a different preset, I can use the same distortion as I am for the guitar as the Kaoss Pad. So that's just a bit of kind of a heads up for that section. So it will sound like this if you've got it. Pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. The thing to keep in mind for this section is that the pitch of the Kaoss Pad is following the vocal. It pretty much mirror move for move, beat for beat. So you're going to need to listen out for what pitch match singing to kind of mirror that up with your Kaoss Pad. If you've not got a Kaoss Pad but you want to do that sort of thing, you can utilize the slide still to achieve a similar effect. That's just going up. Just choose a string that's at the right pitch and just kind of match the pitch of Matt's vocal to that. It helps even more. Again, if you have a sustainer circuit, you can just keep going up, just to kind of not to try and recreate that Kaoss Pad sound, because those are two very different sounds. It's just to mirror the kind of the approach for it. Just have a weird effect, just have loads of delay on it, and it will sound quite good. Just my bit of advice for you there. So that's the Kaoss Pad bit done. It's pretty simple as you're just following the pitch. So now let's get into the actual main bulk of the guitar stuff now. Okay, so moving on to now what I think is the first chorus. So there's now going to be some substantial kind of guitar stuff. It's not very big, it's just very subtle. It's just there to support the kind of the main song in full. My main kind of observation for this, if you want the guitar to blend in with the general feel of the song, my advice to you would be to use the middle kind of pickup position. If you've got like two pickups, or if you've got a Strat, use the kind of like bridge and middle pickup position, just to kind of get that kind of jangly kind of tone. It's just a little thing. It's not the end of the world if you can't do it. It's just that I would try and avoid having that kind of like a normal humbucker blocky kind of sound. I imagine that the guitar that Matt used was his Kaoss guitar with the kind of the two P90s, and using the Matt phase or something like that to give it that kind of jangly kind of sound. But I don't have that. I don't have a push-pull part on this guitar, so I'm using both pickups at the same time. And it will sound kind of generally like this. just has something else to it. It's not kind of really blocky as if it were just a humbucker. If it were, it would sound just like this. And I can contrast that again by doing... It is really subtle the way that I've got it on this guitar. It might be a bit different if I were to use a Strat or something, but I genuinely don't like that kind of sound, but it's all relative and it works well for this song, the same as using that sort of approach for Big Freeze, for example. But that sort of sound does work really well in reference to the song itself and the kind of vibe it has. So it's a rare moment where I would use both pickups, but where I do use it, it's because it kind of is the most appropriate sound. That is just an observation that I have for this song that I use, and it's something that I would suggest that you do. But as with always, with the Sound Like videos that I do, it's all just a suggestion. So after the first chorus, we go straight into that build-up, which just mirrors the notations for the intro, but it's a lot more aggressive. So now that will sound like this. Same as before, we're using the middle pickup position for this because that's the kind of the sound that works really well for it. The only thing that I would really suggest is that you should make sure that your strumming is fairly strong and quite consistent. You want to kind of keep in mind the idea that the song is building as time's going on. So you don't want it to kind of be blending in to kind of the realms that was going on earlier in the song, and you don't want it to be kind of out there. Now, in terms of the effects that I'm using for this, just to go back to what we were looking at for Pedalcam, it is both the blues pedal and my overdrive distortion that are in a parallel circuit. They're kind of affected separately, then they're combined, just to help with that idea that it's pushing towards. So the overdrive distortion has that kind of more drive to it, but the blues pedal is kind of keeping it kind of down in a kind of relative sense. So it helps for that kind of midway through the song kind of punchiness, and it works really, really well. I really like it. It's a really good sound for the kind of at this point in time for the song. And the delay, the same level as before, just a nice amount of level and feedback in time with the song. Really adds to kind of build that ambience and that feel of that kind of that big kind of sound for it. And that's pretty simple on what it is. Now let's look at the next bit, which I believe is a verse. I think it's a verse. So coming straight out of the build-up into the verse now, we're taking out the delay and the overdrive distortion, so we are just left with that blues pedal with that nice bit of crunch. Just completely dry, and there's no other kind of delays or anything at all, so it will sound like this. Same as before, in that middle pickup position, no delay, so it sounds quite jangly and kind of pretty dry. A good counterpoint for what we've just seen in the build-up that had that huge kind of tone. It does kind of slightly come down guitar-wise in terms of the strength and so on that's going in there, but the bass and the drums are where they're starting to kind of really come in now in the kind of the wider context of the song. And that's kind of all it is. There's no kind of cleverness to it. Again, the guitar is not doing anything to kind of be out there, so keep that in mind when you're doing your picking. Don't have a sound that's going too crazy or too out there. And that's kind of all it is. This part of the song is pretty straightforward. And we're now going to look at the next part, which I believe is another chorus. It's really hard to tell what part of this song is when it's just building over time, but I think it's a chorus. So what I normally do in these Sound Like videos is kind of like box all of the verses and all the choruses in together to go, this one chorus is exactly the same as the other chorus. So a key example would be the choruses for Hysteria. It's the same the whole each time it's played, the same for Time Is Running Out and so on. But Invincible is a bit different. In theory it's the same, but there's just a little bit more going on. Again, the song is building over time. So in terms of what's being played for this second chorus is this. It's the same in terms of the chords that are going on there. Of course, it's the same as the other chorus, but they're broken chords. You're picking them more. You're kind of relying on the delay to kind of fill out more of the ambience because of those broken chords. Before it was just all played in one go and it's just a stab. So we're going from to a. Thickening out that sound. The only thing you're doing to change it relative to what was going on previously is that you're just breaking those chords down, you're picking them all the strings individually. It's a really simple technique, but if you take a step back and see what it's doing for the sound overall, it's really good. It's adding a lot more kind of dynamic to the song. It's just something to kind of consider when you want to play not only this song, but kind of other songs in general, where you might want to think, how can I change this up? Or if you are writing your own music, it's just a little trick that you might want to try. Don't have to completely reinvent the song. You can just change your approach, change your performance to add a new dynamic to your playing. I really enjoy doing the whole broken chorus thing. There's really great examples in the back catalogue of Muse songs, and Invincible is a really good song to try out, and also just practice the idea of just breaking those chords down. Apart from that, it's really simple. And that's that second chorus done. There is a third chorus we will get to after the solo. Speaking of, we come straight out of that chorus into the build-up for the solo. Now there's a few ways that we can do it, so let's just dive in. So coming out to that second chorus into the build-up for the solo, the first thing to note to kind of keep in mind is that if you have been doing both pickups at the same time, or kind of a pickup choice for this that I've kind of like laid out, I would switch over to your main bridge pickup for this, so you got the kind of all the bite and all the kind of pinpoint accuracy of what that pickup offers. You want to kind of lose all the kind of like woolliness that the neck pickup offers when you use both those pickups together. Should be a quick movement, but it's kind of really important if you are focusing on the kind of the pickup sound of the guitar overall. And then it will just, what I do is just kind of play a C note while the kind of guitar is building up towards the kind of chuckering guitar, and it'll just sound like that. Nothing too crazy about it. In terms of what's going on while the chucker's going on and playing that C octave, I sometimes play between just that octave or the other kind of more background guitar, what's kind of going on in there. Entirely your choice, but the alternative is this choice. It's nothing too crazy, in fact it might work better for you if it's higher up the neck. It's nothing too groundbreaking if you are using it or if you're not. Both options are fine. It's just something to think about if you want to just kind of experiment with what you're playing and how you're playing it, and what you're bringing to the performance overall. And then we come out of that into the crazy tapping solo, which hopefully should sound good if I'm going to demonstrate it, but... As I said in Pedalcam, the set effects for this part of the song, the solo, is the whammy set to an octave up, of course, and I'm also using, in a parallel circuit, the big muff and the overdrive distortion together to kind of really kind of thicken it out. The big muff helps with the kind of the lower end stuff that's coming from the kind of the octave build up, that really thickens out the kind of lower mid tones from there, and the overdrive distortion really kind of has a good sound for the kind of the more middle to higher mids kind of that's going on there, and together it does sound really good for the kind of broad overview sound. As I've said in other videos, having a number of distortions on your board or to kind of call upon is really good. I really don't like relying on just one distortion sound for an entire song or even in general. I do like to vary it up, and having two pedals to kind of come together in this way really creates a whole new sound. That's that, and that's the solo. At the end of the solo, I do some Kaoss Pad stuff. Now that's going over to preset 75 on the Kaoss Pad. I believe that is the setting that is used on the record, on the album, on the actual song that's recorded. And as I said before, that is going through my pedal board, that's going through the distortions that's going on in there. So it's being affected by both the Big Muff and the overdrive distortion. And it sounds pretty solid. It's a really good way to finish off that sound of the solo, and it will just sound like this. And there we go. Now, so that's the solo all done. There's quite a lot in there. Hope you kind of stood with me on that. Now let's just finish it off with the final chorus and the outro. So the final chorus, once again, it's the same notation. It's just really, it's the culmination of the entire song. This is the kind of the ending point. This is the biggest sound that we want. As the other, same as with the other choruses, it's exactly the same chords and so on that's going on. Just the way you're approaching it is going to be different. Stay on the bridge pickup if you are kind of worrying about that for this point. In terms of the sounds that you want, I am using both the overdrive distortion and my delay here just for kind of thickening out and adding the ambience, which really stands out, particularly at the end of the song. And overall, it will sound, hopefully, good, and it will sound like this. The end of the song, which I really like, and a good way to just kind of finish the song off on the end. A key thing for that is just to make sure that your level is not too high, not too much. That's going to kind of create too much of a wall of sound with the kind of guitar overall. And the feedback is just, well, I've got it almost set to 1 o'clock on my pedal, so that there is definitely a good fair few repeats there, but it's not adding so much that it takes forever to die out. You just want a nice kind of rate of decay for your delay. And that is it. It's just the same chords as the other choruses, obviously. It's just the way that you're performing it is changing it up. This is, as I said before, it's the culmination of the song. You want your biggest sound that you can get in there, a really strong performance from your strumming or picking arm, and just hope for the best. And that was it. That's pretty simple, and that is how to sound like Invincible. And so that was Invincible. As always, I do hope you enjoyed that one and that you learned something along the way and that your tea helped. I know it helped me a lot. As always, this video was just a suggestion on how you can sound like Invincible, but if you've got any advice or input from yourself, do let me know down in the comments. I will read them and I will respond. But until the next video, I've been Harry, and thanks for watching. Bye.